For 3 years, I was the grandmother who never said no. I drove them everywhere, cared for the kids, cooked their meals, and never asked for anything in return. Then one afternoon, my daughter-in-law told me I was no longer welcome. So I took her at her word. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tension boiling across the granite kitchen island. It was a chilly Tuesday afternoon in suburban Ohio, and I had just wiped tomato soup off 4-year-old Toby's sweater. 2-year-old Clara was sitting in her high chair, happily munching on a warm grilled cheese sandwich I had prepared from scratch. Then the hallway door slammed. Elena stepped out from her home office, her headset dangling around her neck and her laptop tucked tightly under her arm. Her eyes swept across the kitchen counter, fixing on the cutting board and the box of crackers sitting near the sink. "I specifically told Graham we are avoiding processed cheddar this month," Elena said, her voice tight and sharp. "And why is Toby eating before 5? You are ruining their entire bedtime routine. He was crying from hunger after preschool, Elena." I replied calmly, rinsing the wooden spatula under warm water. "I gave him half a sandwich to settle his stomach." Elena let out a harsh, dramatic breath. She threw her hands in the air, leaning forward until her knuckles pressed against the counter. "You never follow my system. Every single week you create unnecessary mess and disrupt their schedule. Honestly, Marissa, you are just too much trouble around the kids. If you can't respect my rules, you need to stay away from them completely." The room fell dead silent. Toby looked up with wide, worried eyes, holding his half-eaten crust. I looked at my daughter-in-law. I didn't yell. I didn't argue or defend the 3 years of unpaid childcare I had poured into this household. Instead, I carefully hung the cotton dish towel on the oven handle, picked up my purse from the entryway bench, and zipped my coat. "I understand," I said quietly. I walked out the front door into the brisk autumn air, closed it gently behind me, and drove home. I decided that my days of being an unappreciated safety net were finally over. For 36 months, I had been the invisible foundation of my son's busy household. As a retired middle school administrative assistant, organizing chaos was second nature to me. When my husband Arthur passed away 4 years ago, helping Graham and Elena felt like a comforting purpose. I drove 30 minutes every weekday morning to manage preschool drop-offs, doctor appointments, laundry loads, and homemade dinners. I never asked for compensation. In modern America, full-time daycare for 2 young toddlers easily runs over $2,500 a month. I considered my daily physical labor a gift of love to give the young couple financial breathing room while they built their careers. But somewhere along the way, my presence shifted from a generous blessing to an expected, criticized utility. At 8 o'clock that evening, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Graham. "Hey, Mom," he began, his voice carrying the familiar hesitation of a man caught between 2 worlds. "Elena told me things got a little heated earlier. She had a brutal quarterly review today with senior management. She didn't mean what she said. You know how stressed she gets." I took a sip of hot peppermint tea, leaning back into my favorite armchair. "Graham." She looked me in the eye and told me I was too much trouble and demanded I stay away from the kids, I answered steadily. She was completely articulate and deliberate. "Come on, Mom. Don't take it so personally." He sighed, sounding exhausted. "We still need you tomorrow for Toby's occupational therapy drive at 2, right?" "No, Graham," I replied softly. Elena made her boundaries exceptionally clear, and out of respect for her household, I am stepping back. You and Elena will need to handle tomorrow yourselves. Before he could offer another dismissive excuse, I wished him a good night, hung up the receiver, and set my phone on silent. For the first time in 3 long years, my tomorrow belonged entirely and unconditionally to me. Wednesday morning arrived with an unfamiliar quiet. For years, my alarm had buzzed at 6 sharp so I could navigate highway traffic, unlock my son's back door, and start packing toddler lunchboxes. Instead, I woke up naturally at 7:30, brewed a fresh pot of hazelnut coffee, and sat on my sunlit patio, watching goldfinches peck at the feeder. By 10, I walked into the local community recreation center. I purchased an annual membership, signed up for water aerobics on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and registered as a volunteer docent at the Municipal Botanical Conservatory. For years, I had put my own interests on indefinite hold because someone else needed a ride, a diaper change, or a batch of clean laundry. Meanwhile, across town, my absence was already registering, though Elena refused to admit it. From what my neighbor friend Evelyn told me after spotting Graham at the grocery store, Elena assumed I was merely throwing a passive-aggressive tantrum. In Elena's mind, grandparents were supposed to pout for 48 hours and then return with arms full of groceries and apologies. She believed she held all the leverage because she controlled access to my grandchildren. She had miscalculated my resolve entirely. I was not angry, nor was I plotting some grand, dramatic vengeance. I was simply honoring her spoken request to stay away. At 2:15 that afternoon, my phone lit up with 3 missed calls from Graham. Toby's therapy appointment was at 2:30 across town, and Elena had an emergency client conference while Graham was stuck on a client Zoom call. I didn't answer during my orientation tour of the tropical greenhouse. When I finally checked my voicemail at 4, Graham's voice sounded flustered and rushed. "Mom, we had to cancel Toby's session and pay a late fee. Where are you?" I deleted the message and continued potting orchids under the warm glass ceiling. They had loudly demanded complete independence, and I was giving them the exact space they had asked for. By the second week of my absence, the delicate machinery of their suburban household began grinding its gears. Modern, dual-income life in America leaves razor-thin margins for error. When you strip away 30 hours of free labor every week, the true cost of everyday survival quickly surfaces. Elena attempted to hire an on-demand babysitter through a mobile app. The service charged $30 an hour, required a 4-hour minimum, and charged surge pricing for last-minute bookings. The college student they hired arrived late on Monday, forgot to lock the front storm door, and fed 2-year-old Clara non-organic snack bars that sent Elena into another spiral. On Thursday morning, Toby developed a sudden fever of 101 degrees at preschool. According to the school handbook, sick children had to be picked up within 30 minutes. In previous months, the school would call my cell phone directly. I would pack a thermos of chicken broth, arrive in 12 minutes, and spend the afternoon rocking Toby on the living room recliner while his parents worked undisturbed. Not this time. The school secretary called Elena, who was delivering a virtual presentation to corporate stakeholders in Chicago. Elena frantically forwarded the call to Graham, who was stuck 40 miles away in highway gridlock after an on-site client audit. Graham tried calling me 6 times in 20 minutes. When I didn't pick up because I was attending a watercolor painting workshop at the library, Graham had to abandon his commute, pull his car over on the highway shoulder, and endure a reprimand from his direct supervisor. Elena ended up shutting down her presentation halfway through, taking an unexcused absence, and racing through town in torrential rain to collect our sick grandson. The illusion that I had been too much trouble was rapidly colliding with the brutal logistical reality of raising 2 toddlers alone. And for the very first time in their marriage, there was no silent scapegoat standing by to absorb the blame. On Saturday morning, I did something that was purely for my grandchildren, not for their parents' convenience. Knowing that both children had caught the seasonal viral bug and that the household was likely drowning in takeout boxes, I spent 3 hours simmering bone broth with carrots and tender chicken thighs. I packed the soup into 6 glass mason jars, added 2 containers of fresh blueberry muffins, and placed them in an insulated blue cooler. At 7 o'clock, before the sun had fully burned away the morning fog, I drove over to their cul-de-sac. I did not unlock the front door with the spare key on my keychain. I did not tap on the window or make noise. I simply set the cooler neatly on the covered front porch beside the doormat, placed an index card on top that read, "For Toby and Clara, reheat on low," and drove away. Later that afternoon, Graham texted me a photograph. It was a picture of the worn blue spiral notebook I had left sitting near the microwave on the day Elena dismissed me. For 3 years, I had quietly logged pediatric medication dosages, doctor phone numbers, diaper rash, ointment brands, and the preschool's seasonal dress codes inside those lined pages. Elena found your notebook in the cabinet, Graham's text read. She didn't know you tracked Clara's eczema flare-ups with the humidity changes. Mom, please, let us pay you for gas. Let us make this right. I read the text while sitting on my porch, feeling a quiet pang of sadness mixed with absolute clarity. They still viewed my devotion as a transaction that could be smoothed over with a tank of gasoline or a quick Venmo transfer. I replied simply, "The soup is for the children. I do not need gas money. Enjoy your weekend." I put the phone away and tended to my potted ferns. Love was meant to be accepted with gratitude, not purchased after the fact to ease an uneasy conscience. By the third week, my calendar looked completely different from the chaotic schedule I had kept for years. Instead of carpool routes and laundry cycles, my planner was filled with book club meetings, morning laps at the community pool, and weekend road trips with my longtime friend Nora. Nora and I drove 3 hours north to Lake Erie on a crisp Friday afternoon. We stayed at a quaint bed and breakfast, visited antique markets, and ate fresh perch at a lakeside tavern without checking our watches every 20 minutes. During dinner, my phone vibrated with a message from Graham. "Mom, are you free this Sunday? Elena wants to invite you over for brunch." I read the invitation carefully. It was the classic peace offering used by people who didn't want to actually discuss the core problem, a plate of scrambled eggs and awkward small talk designed to pretend the insult had never happened, followed by an inevitable request to watch the kids while they ran errands. I took a sip of chilled white wine and typed my response. "Thank you for the invite, Graham, but I am out of town at the lake with Nora until Monday evening. Give the little ones hugs from me." Nora looked across the table and smiled gently. "How does it feel to say no?" "It feels strange," I admitted, looking out at the dark water reflecting the harbor lights. For a long time, I convinced myself that if I wasn't constantly available, I wasn't being a good mother or grandmother. But exhausting myself didn't earn their respect. It only made me convenient. "Convenience is never cherished, Marissa," Nora remarked wisely. "Only presence is." That evening, as I fell asleep to the rhythmic sound of lake waves against the shore, I realized I hadn't felt this light or rested since before Arthur got sick. I was finally rediscovering who I was as an independent woman when I wasn't being defined entirely by the endless demands of others. On the fourth Saturday morning, the doorbell rang at 9 sharp. When I opened the front door, Graham was standing on my porch with Toby holding his hand and Clara strapped into her toddler car seat on his arm. Diaper bags and colorful backpacks were slung haphazardly over both of his shoulders. He looked utterly exhausted. Dark purple circles shadowed his eyes. His polo shirt was wrinkled and his hair stood up uncombed. "Hey, Mom," Graham said, attempting a tired smile as he moved forward to step inside. Elena has a major client audit all morning, and I have to finalize the quarterly regional expense report by 1 o'clock. We figured the kids could hang out with Grandma for a few hours. I stood firmly in the doorway, my hand resting gently on the wooden door frame. "Graham, you didn't call before driving over," I said evenly. "I know, but you're always home on Saturday mornings." He stammered, looking bewildered. "And I know how much you miss the kids." Behind me in the dining room, the kettle whistled and laughter drifted from the living room. 5 women from the Botanical Conservatory Volunteer Committee were sitting around my dining table with gardening books, coffee mugs, and fresh blueberry scones, planning the annual spring plant sale. Graham looked past my shoulder, his expression freezing as he registered the full house. "I am hosting the Botanical Committee workshop until 1 o'clock, and then Nora and I are attending a matinee theater performance downtown," I explained calmly. "I cannot watch the children today." "Mom, please," Graham pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Elena and I haven't slept properly in 3 weeks. We're at each other's throats. The house is a disaster." "I understand you are having a difficult time, Graham," I replied softly. But you cannot drop responsibilities at my door without asking. He stood there on the porch, holding the heavy car seat, finally realizing that my time was no longer his. The breaking point occurred on the following Friday night at 10:30. I was sitting in bed with reading glasses on finishing the final chapter of a historical novel when my phone rang on the nightstand. The caller ID showed Graham's name. I answered and pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello, Graham." There was no defensive opening line this time. No excuses about traffic, busy work weeks, or misunderstood intentions. The only sound coming through the speaker was the ragged choking sound of my 34-year-old son crying. "Mom!" Graham choked out his voice, cracking into breathless sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry." I sat up against my pillows, keeping my voice gentle but steady. "Take a breath, Graham. Tell me what happened." Everything fell apart. He wept, sounding like the scared little boy who used to scrape his knees on the elementary playground. Elena had an important overseas client meeting at 6. Clara knocked over a whole pitcher of juice onto Elena's work laptop, and Toby had a complete screaming meltdown because dinner wasn't ready. Elena sat on the kitchen floor and just started sobbing uncontrollably. He paused, catching his breath between heavy shudders. She admitted she's been terrified of failing at work and failing as a mother, Graham whispered. She took all her panic and inadequacy out on you because you made everything look easy. And I was a coward, Mom. I let her treat you like hired help because it made my life comfortable. We treated your love like a free service, and we took you for granted. Hearing my son articulate the truth without deflection was the first genuine progress in 3 years. "Thank you for saying that, Graham," I answered softly into the dark room. "That means a great deal to me. Can we please talk to you, Mom, face to face?" He begged. I paused, looked at the moonlight on my lawn, and agreed to meet them on Sunday morning. We met on Sunday morning at a quiet booth in a local family diner on Route 18. I deliberately chose neutral ground rather than their kitchen, ensuring our conversation remained centered on adult communication rather than domestic chaos. Elena sat across from me with her hands wrapped tightly around a ceramic mug of black coffee. Her usual polished corporate demeanor was stripped away, replaced by an exhausted humility. Her eyes were red, and she looked down at the table before meeting my gaze directly. "Marissa, I owe you a sincere apology," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly but firm in its ownership. "What I said to you 4 weeks ago was cruel, unfair, and completely wrong. The truth is, I was drowning under the pressure of my job and my own impossible standards of perfection. Watching you care for my children with such patience made me feel insecure about my own mothering, and I attacked you to protect my pride. I listened attentively without interrupting. An apology without excuses is rare, and I respected her honesty." "Thank you, Elena," I replied, keeping my hands resting on the table. "I appreciate you saying that. But we need to establish a very clear understanding moving forward." Both Graham and Elena nodded quietly, waiting. "I love Toby and Clara with all my heart," I continued. "And I love both of you. But I am not your nanny. I am not your housekeeper, and I am not an emergency safety net to absorb poor planning. My days of working 30 hours a week as unpaid domestic labor are over." "We understand, Mom," Graham said quickly. "We don't expect that anymore. Here is what I will offer," I stated calmly. "I will take the kids every Wednesday afternoon from 2 until 5 to go to the park or library, and we will do a family dinner once a month." They agreed without hesitation, finally understanding that true family love requires clear and healthy structure. 6 months have passed since that morning at the diner, and the rhythm of our family has transformed into something sustainable and genuine. Graham and Elena had to make difficult practical adjustments to make their household function independently. They enrolled Toby in an extended after-school enrichment program, hired a local cleaning service twice a month, and reorganized their telecommuting schedules, so Graham took Friday afternoons while Elena managed Monday mornings. They had to cut back on expensive vacation splurges to afford professional support, but the daily tension in their marriage significantly decreased. As for me, Wednesday afternoons have become the highlight of my week. Yesterday at 2 o'clock, I pulled my sedan into their driveway. Toby came running down the hallway with his shoes on, holding a colorful crayon drawing of a green dinosaur, while little Clara clutched her teddy bear, shouting my name with pure joy. There were no overflowing laundry hampers waiting for me on the counter, no passive-aggressive remarks about snack ingredients, and no expectation that I would scrub pots or fold sheets before I left. I took my grandchildren to the town library's story hour, bought them vanilla ice cream cones at the corner parlor, and brought them home promptly at 5 o'clock. When I walked them to the front door, Elena was waiting in the kitchen. She smiled warmly, handed me a freshly baked loaf of banana bread, wrapped in tin foil, and said, "Thank you so much for today, Marissa. The kids had a wonderful time." "You're very welcome, Elena," I replied with a warm smile. Stepping back was the hardest choice I ever had to make, but it saved our family. By refusing to let my devotion be treated as an obligation, I reclaimed my own life, and in doing so, I taught my children how to truly value my presence. Real love thrives best, not in endless quiet sacrifice, but in mutual honor, grateful hearts, and the shared dignity of healthy boundaries.